Any statements or opinions expressed in this interview are personal and do not represent the opinions or views of any organization to which these individuals belong.
Yeah, we're recording. All right, so this is the inaugural episode of Slightly Nightly, which is, my personal investigation into the nightly virtues and, kind of everything that occurs like mentally and with one's character to try to become a more knightly individual. And to that end, I have invited Count Barthelemy of Illyria here. Do you want to intro yourself or? No,
that's okay. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So you're a knight in the Society of Creative Anachronism. One of my own personal aspirations. So part of the reason I got into the SCA was my good friend Mark telling me about like the virtues and how they're also called peer-like qualities, and that's like something that people aspire to within the SCA. And so I was like, that really sounds like something I'm interested in, because I was really interested in like the Victorian ideal of like the classy but capable gentleman and everything. And he was telling me that the virtues as the SCA sees them are kind of loosely based on a Victorian interpretation of what was historically correct. But so he got me involved in that, and you're the first person I spoke with besides him about the virtues. And actually, it's obviously a topic that's very near and dear to your heart. And so, I was wondering, do you have a personal like list of virtues that you work from?
Yeah. I love the idea of virtues, and it's because I'm a humanist atheist, and they sort of, without a religious leader or religion, I like to have framework to base my life and decision making on, right? And I have a personal list of virtues that I got from this book right here. It's called Rules for a Knight by Ethan Hawke, and it's a little green book.
The actor?
No, actually.
Okay. I was confused.
Yeah, and it has a list of rules. This is towards the back, but each rule has a chapter dedicated to it, and it's kind of based on an unproven kind of family story in this man's life. He discovered some old parchment in his attic, and it's very romantic. He discovered it in the 1970s or whatever, and and supposedly the letter and rubric goes back to like the 14th century, where they can trace their lineage back to a 14th century knight. And there are lots of like cool virtue writings, like Raymond Lull. Catholicism is rich with history of the the Catholic virtues and the seven deadly sins, which are sort of the opposite of those virtues. But my personal list that I like the best is from modern writing. It's from the 1970s. It's from this book called Rules for a Knight, and it's supposedly based on this letter, but I mean that claim's probably pretty spurious. And it includes solitude, humility, gratitude, pride, cooperation, friendship, forgiveness, honesty, courage, grace, patience, justice, generosity, discipline, dedication, speech, faith, equality, love, and death. And it forms a circle of life when you read through the rules of the knight. And it forms a little bit of a cornerstone of my belief set. And I like that it includes some rules that are not necessarily virtues, like death or speech, or pride. And pride is not necessarily covered in humility. Be thou not prideful, which is tough for me. So so it's kind of more comprehensive than a list of virtues, but that's kind of my answer to that question, is that's my list.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I did find it interesting that it was like humility and then pride.
Yeah.
And I like I can see the point in having, because humility is good, but I mean there are times where it feels right and proper to be prideful and have it, because I mean like confidence is a thing, and can make you more effective and impactful at the things that you do. But yeah, so my personal list is actually just something I feel kind of bad because I don't know where I found it. I just found it on a blog somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, faith, hope, charity, courtesy, chivalry, diligence, kindness, patience, humility, mercy, and courage. And
I love mercy. I love mercy.
I like mercy a lot. The one that is hardest for me there is diligence.
Yeah.
Because I there's the trope of like there's the thing going around, like if you were a former gifted kid and like things aren't super easy for you, you just give up. And I mean that's kind of something I struggle with. Yeah, and so and I've got the, is it Raymond Lull?
Raymond Lull. That's what I've always heard it, but I'm not, native French speaker, so
right. Yeah, me neither.
I probably don't know.
Mark gave me that one and another one whose name escapes me at the moment. And Sir Yastreb gave me Joffrey de Charny, which I believe is Knight's Own Book of Chivalry.
Mm-hmm.
And I have read through them. It is not super accessible reading,
right?
But there's a lot of good stuff there. I specifically remember I'm looking at because I know there's a lot of stuff that I wrote down, and my ADD will pull me away down a rabbit trail if I don't keep an eye on it.
Sure.
But I remember that you specifically mentioned the Roman virtues, like in one of our first conversations.
Yeah, I also kind of make a study of the virtues, just as sort of like a kind of fun amateur anthropology project, right? And I mean, you've got Catholic virtues, and where did they come from? And you can kind of look back and see some of the lessons in the Bible, but they're also heavily influenced by the Roman virtues, which the Romans really believed in this concept of the individual and placed that concept of the individual in context with the world around him, particularly civilization. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that made the Romans so successful, if brutal, was that they considered each citizen as having an individual requirement of virtue, and then they also had public virtues. So they had individual virtues and they had public virtues. Mm-hmm. Those public virtues were things that they kind of aspired to as a society.
Okay.
And then they had individual virtues, which were things that are more in line with the knightly virtues or the Catholic virtues or rules for a knight or whatever, however you want to put it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are familiar. I've got a list here. So a lot of them are familiar. Clementia, like mercy.
Clemency. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Mercy. So that's familiar. And then honestas, which is sort of like respectability, and veritas, which is truthfulness. Those mm-hmm. are kind of familiar. But they also have some others that don't really make it into later writings. But you were saying diligence is one of yours, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Well, so the Romans had industria, which was that you should always engage in hard work, and that's mm-hmm. How you make a good person out of yourself. Good people should work hard, and that's very mm-hmm. Roman. That's very Roman thing. Mm-hmm. But they also had some things that you don't see much of that I really like, and I think they're good fodder for thought, especially when you try to place us in the context of the SCA or the greater world, like comitas, which is humor, mm-hmm. ease of manner.
Okay,
you've heard it probably explained as courtesy in the SCA, right? So. Mm-hmm. Be thou courteous and, be courtly. Well, for the Romans, that was, this idea of comitas, but it also had to do with friendliness and openness, which, I think, kind of is kind of an interesting take, like to look at. They had a public virtue, which they believed in. I can't remember what it's called, but they had several public virtues that were like joy, frivolity. There's a time to celebrate, and those are kind of like balanced against some individual virtues like severitas. So severitas was the ability to control yourself, and it's like be stern. And then they also had gravitas, which gets used all the time. That
Right.
That's Latin virtue, goes back to Rome, and it's kind of a sense of the importance of something, being able to be sincere and taken sincerely when you need to be, but also you want to be a complete human being. You want to also be able to take joy in small things and have a good, happy life, but you need to take things seriously when it's time to take things seriously. And so I think for that reason, I sort of like the Roman virtues a lot, because there's a lot of balance. And in some of the other virtues or list of rules or whatever, it doesn't give much room to be human. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, you should always be on a quest for perfection, or have fun isn't a virtue anywhere else that I can find except for in the Roman virtues.
Right.
And I think that I think having fun's a big part of life. What makes play is how we acquire new skills when we're children, right? I mean, so I think losing that, like growing up and becoming an adult, I think there's this puritanical idea that we should stop enjoying ourselves or stop having fun. I like what the Romans have to say about that. No. There's a time for drinking wine and frivolity and and praising Bacchus, that kind of thing. So I'm a fan of the Roman virtues.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say that's kind of always been my interpretation of temperance. Was, a little bit of balance. And like, from what I understand, it's the sorry, my cat's meowing outside my door. I don't know if you can hear. But my understanding is, like, just from context, has always been that it's really just to back somebody off from being too focused on, like, more similar to mercy. You know what I mean? Like, don't be too focused on justice or vengeance or anything. Have some temperance to pull you back a little bit. Or maybe kind of like the opposite of severity. I can see that. But for me, it's just kind of been just more about balance and all things, not to get too Thanos-y about it. And then I also wanted to talk about that Lewis Carroll video that you sent me shortly after we started talking about that.
Yeah, there's a really great Lewis Carroll had some really smart things to say about chivalrousness, or being chivalrous in modern society. And there's a really good video that goes into depth on that. And it's just a really good reminder that the code of chivalry is was kind of a way that you balanced being, a warrior and potentially killer, and having great responsibility, and it balances that with a code of behavior. And that video, I think, does a really good job placing things in context and reminding us why that's important. And I think also sort of points to, the weakness in having a ruthless acquisition of anything, power, money, militaristic might, without having a corresponding, set of principles that guide your decision making, right? So I love that video. If you could post a link to it, I think anybody that loves virtues and making a study of the virtues, it'll probably not be anything new to them, but it's a good reminder. I definitely love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna obviously this is all new to me, but I'm gonna try to post a link, like where that corner over there or whatever. And then if nothing else, I'll put it in the comments. or the description. But yeah, like I did like they were talking about Lancelot and like how humble he was, because I do think that men of great power, in my experience, are rarely need to worry about being too humble, in my experience. You know what I mean? And I mean that on like the grand stage of things. I'm not referring to anybody I know in particular, because most of the people I know are pretty great. If they're not, I don't spend much time with them. But yeah, it's interesting. And then the next question I had, and we've kind of touched on this already, was like, what led you to those virtues? And I obviously you said that book. Did you find that on your own, on like a personal investigation, or?
Actually, I didn't find it until after I was knighted. It was given as a gift to my wife on the occasion of her squiring by Mistress Kalea.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so from Meridies, and one of the Mistress Kaleas from Meridies, not the Countess, but yeah, she gave it to Oda, and I picked it up and read it. And I was blown away by it. I mean, I thought, man, this is really fantastic. The very first one that it dedicates time to is my favorite one, Solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very outgoing, extroverted guy, and I draw a lot of energy from talking with people.
Yeah.
But my deepest foundational decision making has always been made in the quiet of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
By myself or one other person,
okay.
walking through the woods, being quiet, and taking my own counsel, and being and enjoying solitude. Solitude's nowhere near any of those other those lists of virtues, and being able to take your own counsel is, I think, a virtue. I think some people are a little afraid to take their own counsel sometimes. As a young man, I certainly was. I certainly wanted validation for every decision that I made from others. And I think that was a lack of responsibility. I think I was trying to divest myself of the consequences of making my choices. And solitude helps you keep your own counsel. And so
that's good.
That's how I found that list. But before then, when I was looking into having a Roman persona for the SCA, I learned a lot about the Roman virtues. I fell in love with the Old Republic senators like Cicero. And thought that all of that history was fascinating and what drove them. They were very principled decision makers, if their writings were to be believed. I'm sure they had as much passions as we do in the modern times, but they followed principle, and it was very important to them. And those principles were informed by the Roman virtues. So I enjoyed that. And then before then, I read Ducharny and Lull, and I don't remember much. That's a long time ago. And I probably need to go back. I'm reading Le Morte d'Arthur right now.
Okay.
Which I think more than anything else, that's the cornerstone of the Society of Creative Anachronism. I don't think that I don't think that it was historical virtues that we were following. And like you say, Sir Thomas Malory was one of those Victorian writers, right? So so I think you're right. I think you're right with what you're saying earlier about how those virtues, not as it was, but as it should have been or should be. And yeah, I learned about that. I liked what Lull and Ducharny have to say about false knights. Those are good parts. Because we have to deal with false knights, metaphorically and for real. So I liked what they had to say, and I like all the virtues. I've kind of made a study of it as an kind of an amateur anthropologist or whatever. But yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Now, and like I said, like I started kind of based on I didn't realize it was a Victorian interpretation of knightly virtues. I just knew it was Victorian virtue that I was kind of interested in at the time. And like, I gather that nobody is without no figure in history of any greatness or relevance, is without their imperfections. But in general, one of the people that I have, long admired is Teddy Roosevelt. And I mean, he kind of strikes me as, like one of those Victorian style greats.
Yeah.
All the work he did for natural conservation, and then all the stories about how like he got shot mid-speech and finished his speech and stuff like that.
It'll take more than
impressive.
that to drop a bull moose.
Right. Exactly. That's see, this is why we're friends. But that's like that kind of thing. The drive and the courage to do the right thing in the face of adversity is at the root of it all. You know what I mean? Like that's more than anything what really drew me to it. And I've seen a lot of that since I joined the SCA. And if there was anything pulling me away, that would keep bringing me back, but nothing's pulling me away. So,
yeah.
And then let me see. You said, was it the virtue you said you found challenging? Was it, you said pride is one you struggle with?
I like that as a reminder to be thou not prideful. I mean, I think we all probably struggle a little bit with pride. But that's a sin, more like 7 deadly sin, more. But it's on the list of rules or whatever. But I think that humility is one of those things that we all struggle with, and I think that that's because sometimes we forget the definition of humility. I think we're taught in today's age that humility is not beating your own drum, that kind of thing. But I think the kind of more classical sense, like the more, I guess, sort of knightly sense of humility is not thinking less of yourself, because these were people that were of noble bearing and noble station, and they were, they had a responsibility to the people that were there, were in service to them and in fealty to them, or were the servants on their lands. And so I don't think classical or knightly humility was about like what we make it about today. I think it was the concept that your role, you should think of yourself. It's not that you should think less of yourself, but you should think of yourself less. You're put in a position to take care of your dependents, and you should think of them first. And you should remember, no matter what lofty, position you attain in life, you need to, the higher up you go, really in reality, the further down you are. Like the more of a servant you are. When you're crowned in the SCA, you're the first most important servant. You have the greatest potential to falter than anybody else in the SCA. So you need to do a good job there. And that, I think, is humility. I don't think that's, taking off your shoes and riding a donkey into your coronation ceremony. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to, you have to have a noble bearing and fill the role. And I think a more kind of modern version of humility would have you downplay very important parts of your role. I'll serve. I can help serve feast. I know I'm crowned, but no big deal. Let me go back there and grab this, platter and bring it out. Look how humble I am. See, I'm not too afraid to serve people. Well, I think true humility is realizing that you're causing difficulties for people when you do something like that. And knowing your place and thinking, okay, well, I might really like to go and serve feast because I enjoy that. Or I might really like the feeling of wearing the crown but passing out food. That would be really cool. I'd really like people to think how humble I am. That's not humility. That's false humility, right? Real humility is sitting there at high table when it's boring and realizing I signed up for this. I need to have noble bearing and thank the feastcrat and the servers and be the ultimate servant. Maybe I would rather be playing video games, but that's not my role. I'm the ultimate servant of the people. I'm here to perform a ceremonial duty, and that is to break bread as the head of the kingdom there in front of everybody. So humility is difficult, and it's something that you got to really fight with. I think everybody has to fight with that, and it's complex. It's a complex kind of thing. Personally, the thing that I probably have the greatest difficulty with is faith. So as I said before, I'm a humanist, but I don't, I'm naturally, I guess by very definition, don't have faith in the way that a lot of the Christian knights do, or the Templars, or any number of those, religious warriors, which, chivalry is deeply entwined with religion.
Right.
And even the Roman equites, that one of the virtues was in being an upright, believer of the gods. And, you made sacrifices to the gods. And that was, one of the big things. So that faith has been really difficult for me to put in context for the SCA and my own personal life and my own personal beliefs. And it's something I struggle with a lot. I eventually defined it for myself as faith in my fellow human beings, because there's a lot going on in the world right now. And and we have an unprecedented ability to see other people mess up. And it's really tough sometimes to think about the future and have hope. And just like you have hope that things turn out right, I think faith is the hope that, your fellow man isn't as bad as they may have seemed in that news article or that thing they said on Facebook.
Right.
And so I asked, when I was knighted, I asked several people I thought very highly of to come speak on the virtues, because the virtues were cool to me, before I was put on vigil, to give me something to think about. I had a silent vigil and I wanted to be thoughtful. And Sir Valdrick came down, Albritson. He drove all the way down from Nashville all the way down to Mobile.
Oh, geez.
It was a long drive, and he had to speak on Friday night. So, basically drove all that way, got out of his car, threw on his tunic, and came and spoke. And we were knighted around the same time, so we were kind of contemporaries.
Okay.
And what he has to say about faith is really uplifting, and he helped place that in its frame for me. He explained that faith, in the context of the SCA and the modern world, is not necessarily belief in something supernatural or religious, but it's belief in the system. It's belief in your brothers and sisters. It's belief in, that things are going to work out okay. And he explained that displaying faith within the context of the SCA is like being a squire and trusting that the knights are making the right decision by not knighting you yet. And man, that's those are some stout words. Those are a lot of us on the path as squires struggle with, what do you mean that guy over there got knighted and I didn't?
Yeah.
Some folks have been squires have been a squire for decades.
Yeah.
And I think that really is a virtue within the context of the SCA, being able to have faith in the system and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a knight in my heart over here, and I'm going to do what I can to enjoy the game for what it is, and I'm going to try to live the best life that I can, and I'm not going to worry about or blame or grow bitter about things outside of my control, because I have faith. I have faith that things will work out, and as they should, And if that means something different for me, it means something different for me. And so I really like that answer, but I'm a naturally really skeptical person. And I catch myself all the time not having faith in my brothers, not having faith in my sisters, not having faith in the people around me that I'm working alongside. And I think I'm naturally skeptical. And so I'm naturally not inclined to be good at that, that virtue. And so I would say that faith is my weakest virtue on every level, in a historical context, in a more modern, reframed context. I struggle all the time with faith. And then I also struggle with prowess. Prowess is ever fleeting,
Right.
and it's something that needs constant maintenance.
Yeah, it's perishable.
Yeah, yeah. And so prowess, I think, is another great weakness of mine. But yeah.
Well, my helmet doesn't think so, but yeah, like so faith to me for what it, and I'm a strongly lapsed Christian. I don't really even know that it's hard to say. So like I pretty much grew up an atheist, and then I became a Christian, got baptized and everything while I was in the military and deployed. And then I have since pretty much just it's whatever, it's like it's not, it doesn't even enter my mind anymore, because it's just like just the way my life has gone. And so faith to me has really kind of come to where it means faith like in the virtues. And I don't think that as often as I should. Like that thought doesn't enter my mind as often as I feel it should. But for me, I've been interpreting it as if I consider the virtues and if I consider my actions through that lens, the decision I make will be the right one, or at least as right as I can be, for my understanding. And so if I make a decision while looking at things through that lens, I will not regret it. And so like, have you ever read, there's a book by, I can't remember his first name, his last name is Eldridge. It's called Wild at Heart. And it's a Christian, man's devotional sort of thing.
Yes, actually, one of my very close friends and confidants gave me a copy of that book and told me to read it. Yeah. I'll have to confess, though, truthfulness, honesty is a virtue, right? I've only read about 3/4 of it. I got distracted. Okay. But yeah, no, I know the book that you're talking about. It's a good book.
Yeah, yeah, and like there's also a book that goes with it. I want to say it's called like the Wild at Heart Field Manual or something like that. And it gives you like a movie to watch each week and then like kind of ponder that. And so like one of the first movies was Legends of the Fall, I think, with Brad Pitt and everything. And
great movie.
It really is. Like, and I only watched it. Growing up, I was like, that sounds dumb. Like I only watched it because of that book, and I'm really glad I did. Yeah. But and it gives the example of the three brothers, Brad Pitt as I think the middle brother, Tristan, and then his older brother and his younger brother. And the example it gives is like his older brother, like takes the power and authority he has to kind of make things work for him in a way that isn't always great. And he's kind of the example of strength gone wrong.
Yeah.
And then his younger brother is the example of strength just gone. Because like he struggles with like feeling like he's man enough, because he's got these two examples of older brothers who can always accomplish everything that he can't and stuff. And so he goes off. He's like, well, the military will make a man out of me. And, no spoilers for anybody for like a 20-plus-year-old movie or whatever, but so, yeah, it's like that movie really made me start to think a lot about virtue. And then and I saw that like 2008, 2009. And that kind of led me into thinking of virtue in general, which that was kind of the genesis of it all. You know what I mean? And that was at a time when I was more in line with the Christian concept of faith. And, since then that's more or less gone by the wayside. And I've just taken faith to mean faith in the virtues. And that has, when I remember to do that, when there's something that I stop and think about, that has never led me astray. Right. I do still, everybody screws up. I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect or any more virtuous than anybody else. I in this politically charged time have said things that I probably could have said better or shouldn't have said at all. And I'll
agree with that, Nikon. I will agree with that.
Yeah. and I try to retract that where I can, make amends as possible, because people screw up, and hopefully, fortunately, the times that I have been able to do that, it has been well received. But here we all are. So anyway, before this gets too doom scrolly, let me see. Are there any virtues that you particularly would like to see more of that stand out, or any particular changes that you'd like to see happen? And that's any interpretation of that you want.
So within the context of the SCA, or
can be.
Yeah. Okay.
Life,
all right.
Whatever.
Up to my interpretation.
Yeah.
I guess I would like to see more faith.
Mm-hmm.
I would really like to see more faith. In the SCA especially. There's a lot of things that we have to do in the SCA that are for good reason. Certain processes, not within the game, but outside of the game on the kind of corporate side of things, are not transparent for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
for legal reasons, for good legal reasons, privacy, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so things have to happen behind closed doors. And I wish I saw a little more faith from folks. It's tough. It's tough having people feel like, even though you have a group full of wonderful, hardworking people who all have good reputations in the society, it's like by virtue of going behind that closed door, people suspect that we're no longer those good people. And I think if I would love it, I would appreciate it. It would mean the world to me if more people gave us their faith. And we're trying hard to inspire that faith every day. At least, SCA wise. Same thing for being a knight, really. It's a job. It's not necessarily just an award, right? And we are being asked to judge our fellow man on whether or not they meet our criteria for becoming a knight before we pass judgment and give our recommendation to the crown. And by its nature, that whole process needs to be behind closed doors. It wouldn't be fair to the individual to make a public spectacle of whether or not they measured up. And so it can't be transparent. And I've seen a lot of folks assume things, or take things out of context, or take a collection of things out of context and build a narrative out of that, where it vilifies the good people trying to make good but hard decisions. And the counter to that, the salve to that, is, to me, this virtue of faith, of having faith that, well, all right, so people decry the knights or the white belts on Facebook all the time. I see it all the time. And I often ask them, I'm like, okay, well, so I get that maybe you don't agree with some of the decisions we've made, or maybe you think somebody should be a knight and they're not. But let me ask you this. Who shouldn't be a knight? What individual do you feel like isn't worthy that's in that order? And the answer is usually, unless somebody's like really mad at somebody or something like that, the answer is usually, it's like, well, there's not anybody I'd kick out. I'm just saying, you guys need to knight so-and-so. They're awesome. And I have to be like, look, if you think that a body of a decision-making body like the knights is over here, and you look at the individuals and you think about us, do you think that we're being awful on purpose? Or do you think that maybe there's something we might know, or something we might hope for that you don't know about, and that maybe there's something going on there? And that takes a leap of faith for people. And I get that it's tough, and I get that some people won't be able to give me that, and that's okay. Okay. But there would be less bitterness and vitriol in the society if more people gave each other the benefit of the doubt. And I guess that's what I'm really feeling today. I'm really feeling that today. I think that the Knights are doing the best they can, and we're changing and trying to do better. We really are. In a lot of different people's criterias too. Like, we're being pulled in different directions sometimes. We're trying to do good, and we're trying to follow these virtues. But if you can't even pick a list of virtues, right? Like, I don't think you could get a list of virtues that everybody in the society would even agree on.
Right.
So, and then heaven forbid you have to define them. You might get 7 words. You might get a list of 7 words beat together, but good luck having everyone define that the same. And and so I mean, we're trying, and faith would go a long way in helping everybody. Faith in faith in the Knights, faith in the society, faith in your seneschals, faith in the crowns. Saying, hey, maybe that's not how I would have done it personally, but I'm not in that position of servant leadership, and so I don't know what they're measuring. Maybe you're like mad because they punished somebody, or maybe you're mad because they didn't punish somebody, but maybe you don't have access to everything that they do. Do you know those people to be good and true people? If you do, then give them a little faith. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, I'm interviewing you with like this for a reason.
I'm also. Can you hear my baby crying in the background? I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. But I mean, if it's distracting, if you need to, we can take a break if you need to. Okay. But yeah, so like, I think probably a lot of that is a cultural thing beyond just SCA culture. Like, in general, people have become such skeptics that we don't trust the people in authority when they do something we don't like. That's just kind of the nature of the beast at this point. And it's difficult to kind of get that sort of shift away, because I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And getting people to shift, like I think it's probably easier for me because like I know you, I can have this kind of a conversation with you, and I'm sure most of the people who know you feel they can, but like, you don't know everybody. You know what I mean? I don't know how many people are out there that don't know anybody who has any sort of insight into things like that, and so they don't have somebody they can kind of have a heart to heart with who can allay their fears, because there's a lot of fear out there. And I mean, I'm sure that like any member of the bod, or any knight or any peer would be happy to sit somebody down and say, have this kind of conversation. Like, there are, maybe consider that we have perspective that you don't. And like, I'm in like 5 different groups where it's like, ask the Knights, ask the Chivalry, ask the Laurels. And that kind of question comes up all the time. And the answers are always the same. It's like, we make these decisions for a reason. We can't go into those specific decisions. And like, it's a broken record, but it's the kind of thing where like, people kind of have anxiety about it. Like, they got to keep having the same fears tamped down. And I'd imagine that's probably true with like the bod, when you see board of directors, for anybody who listening who doesn't know what that is. If you see or hear about something that you don't understand and it doesn't seem to make sense, it's hard to trust people you've never met or communicated with to be making a decision that doesn't seem, at least on the surface, to make sense to you. And I mean, that's a cultural shift we can try. Maybe y'all should make an Ask the Bod group. It's not like y'all have anything else going on.
We actually have town halls that we're going to start doing now,
cool.
where you can submit your questions, and then we'll have a town hall, and different members of the corporate office will answer them, and maybe some bod members too. The board of directors directs a society president, and then there are several people that work for the president. And there are a lot of corporate officers, and they are wonderful people, and they do a lot of really hard work, and they do the day-to-day. Like the Society Seneschal, for example, is one of those officers, right? And they do incredible work, and they're busy all the time. So the board of directors is sort of attributed with things that aren't necessarily the board doing, right?
Right.
And it's not a lack of transparency. I don't think that anything has been obfuscated. It's just complex and difficult to grasp. I mean, it would take a long time to kind of go over it. It would probably take a very long time. But but there are some really great things that some of those officers are doing to try to educate people and reach out to them. And one of those things is the town halls. There was an SCA announcement about it, and I think you can still submit some questions for it. And so while we're on that subject, before we move back to the virtues, definitely check that out, because I get it. We get it. We've been y'all. We've been not on the board. We've been not a corporate officer. We know what it's like. You're like, oh, why did you guys decide that? I don't get it. And so, it's a big business. It's a big, corporation, nonprofit business. And so there's a lot going on, and it's we're going to have town halls. We're going to, also you can always write an email to comments@sca.org, and we all read those. Every director reads those. Several officers read those. So if you ever feel like, you need something said, say it. Like, you guys are the membership. We're here to serve. Like I said, the loftier the position, the more of a servant you are, and we're there, it's not like being crowned. We're there to serve every member, and we mean that. And so, it's there. Comments@sca.org. If you want to be heard, just write in.
Yeah. And I think too, probably just a lot of people don't realize quite how accessible you guys are. Because if you're, depending on your level of involvement, stuff like that, it may not be necessarily a thing people even realize. Like there's this board of directors, and that some nameless, faceless entity up in the great beyond. Like, a lot of people just probably don't have that perspective. Again, I think that's just dependent on how involved they are. But anyway, what was the next one? Let me see. This is probably obviously kind of a gimme, but do you feel the virtues benefit you, and how have they impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've talked about that a good bit already. Right. I don't think we need to retread it, but but just in short, the virtues are my framework for decision making.
Right.
And they form the principles that that guide my life. And and so, I really appreciate them. I think I've been successful in life outside of the SCA because of courage and honesty and principle of candor, that comes from being both courageous and honest. When you say, hey, in all due candor, I'm about to tell you something that you don't like. I'm speaking truth to power now. Right. I think a lot of people have fear and don't want to do that kind of thing in their professional lives. But I think that a manager who's worth his salt, his or her salt, I should say, their salt, will appreciate candor. And if they don't, then you're probably better off somewhere else, so candor has worked out really well for me. The virtues have helped my professional life, my personal life, and they inform a lot of what I do everywhere.
Sweet. So, and then the last thing I really had was I don't know if you've picked one, but I wanted to mention an example that I have just seen in the news, etc., of virtue in action. And the one that it's kind of lighthearted, kind of not, but the one that I want to mention is I saw something. It was an interview or a blurb from an interview with Winona Ryder talking about when they were filming Dracula in, I think, 93. And there was a scene where I think she was like on a bed. She's supposed to be crying or something. And the director, who I believe was Francis Ford Coppola, wanted everybody to stand off stage and like just hurl insults and invectives at her to upset her so she could cry. And I can't speak to like acting as an art, you know, I can't get into all that, but that was not her decision. That was his. And so he wanted to do that. And Keanu Reeves and Anthony Hopkins were like, no, I'm not doing that. And I think it's one thing for Anthony Hopkins, who's well respected in the industry, even at that time, et cetera. And this is Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah. But Keanu Reeves was not the name he is now, you know, like, right. Like almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago. And so, and I think that probably took some courage for him to stand by his principles and to speak to who is effectively his boss, somebody who has incredible clout in the industry and could wreck his career. Just be like, no, I'm not. That's a terrible thing to do, and we're friends, and I'm not doing that. Yeah. I think that was a big deal, and and we've seen a lot of good things and heard a lot of good things about Keanu over the years. We've and one of the things is people are like, Keanu, you're amazing, and he's like, I'm not amazing. Don't put me on a pedestal. And on the one hand, that sounds appropriately humble, but on the other hand, he may just be like, look, I'm not that great. Y'all gonna find out some stuff and it's gonna hurt. Like, I don't know, but he seems like a solid dude, you know, who made the right decision in a place where it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I he's definitely one of those. Keanu Reeves is definitely one of those people that we would all feel like kicked puppies if he turned out to not be a good human being. Yeah. But you know, to kind of springboard off that, I see that happen a lot in the SCA. Mm-hmm. You put people on pedestals all the time, and we're not perfect. I've had this conversation with my friends that are knights very frequently. I believe that we all have a great weakness. I think that we all have a virtue that we're very weak at. And it's funny when we talk about it, it usually turns out to be pretty jocular, but the weakness we define for ourselves is very often not the weakness that our brothers see in us. And there's something to be, you know, there's something to be said there. If Keanu Reeves winds up having a weak virtue, I'll still like him for his other virtues. I think we as a culture have kind of gotten to a point where we just throw people out when they have a blemish. And I really personally hate that. I have learned great things from imperfect people, and I have yet to met a perfect person, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm right here, Bart. But yeah, well, so that's all I had. Is there anything you wanted to touch on, or?
No, not at all. That was very enjoyable. I had a good time. Thank you for doing this, and I'm going to really look forward to seeing all the other interviews you put together. I think it'll be a fun philosophical and anthropological experiment. Look forward to it.
I appreciate it. I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know when this one is going to go live, because like I've still got to, you know, try to see if I need to clean up the sound any or anything, like put blurbs at the beginning and end and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll let you know. Thanks for coming out. It was fun. Absolutely. I appreciate this.
My pleasure.
All right, man. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.